Welcome to our second homeroom Freedom Summer 2024, Urgent Lessons to Save Our Future. Folks, this is the homeroom we have all been waiting for. We are so pleased and honored to have Judy Richardson, a veteran member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, joining us tonight. Judy will provide us with a first-hand account of Freedom Summer 1964, which will be incredibly useful for us as we map out our own blueprint for Freedom Summer 2024. This will truly be a unique and invigorating conversation, and I am so happy you could all join us for it. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, Charlie Cobb will not be joining us tonight. He does send his thoughts, and we hope we can speak with him again sometime soon. But we have a lot planned for you. And to provide grounding throughout tonight's program, we will be joined by Seattle-based high school teacher Jessie Hagopian, who is also the organizer for the Zen Education Project's Teach the Black Freedom Struggle campaign. Additionally, actor Rosalind Coleman will be leading us in our Artivism moment by reading an excerpt from a famous speech from Ella Baker from 1964. We have a lot, as I told you, planned for you tonight. We're looking to invigorate you, inspire you, and motivate you as we go down the road to May 3rd. We're also looking forward to hearing from you when we move into our breakout rooms before coming back from some closing words of inspiration. Now, before we begin, I'd like to ask you to please drop in your chat your name and where you're joining us from. Let me just start. I purposely waited until this moment. I'm Kay Wise Whitehead, and I'm joining you from the beautiful shores of Baltimore City. We are rebuilding as I speak. Give us a sense of how you're feeling about Freedom Summer 2024. Are you feeling excited, motivated, inquisitive? I'm feeling very excited tonight. Put that into the chat, your name, where you're from, and how you are feeling. And so while you're doing that, I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly Crenshaw to kick us off for tonight's program. Kimberly is professor of law at Columbia and UCLA. She's also the co-founder and executive director of the African American Policy Forum. Take it away, Kim.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for joining us. May 3rd, our National Day of Action. Our country is in the midst of some trying times, but these convenings give us an opportunity to consolidate our collective power and to expand our coalition in service of racial justice, education, and multiracial democracy. This year marks the 60th anniversary of Freedom Summer 1964, and we at AAPF have chosen to honor it by taking inspiration from our elders who resisted oppression through teaching and organizing. Freedom Summer was a turning point in the civil rights movement, bringing national attention to the struggle for racial justice. Similarly, we hope that the May 3rd Day of Action will launch Freedom Summer 2024 as a turning point in defeating the efforts to impose autocratic minority rule across every aspect of our lives, beginning with the attacks on CRT, anti-racism, wokeness, and now DEI. The goal of this well-organized and well-funded faction is to erase the entire legacy of the movements that brought us civil rights, women's rights, workers' rights, LGBTQ rights, and voters' rights. This movement began as an attack on public schools by weaponizing CRT. They utilized buzzwords like white discomfort, parents' rights, both sidesism, and neutrality to constrain educators in an attempt to miseducate a generation. For example, North Dakota's anti-CRT legislation precludes instruction that indicates that, quote, racism is not merely the product of learned individual bias or prejudice, unquote. This effectively prohibits teaching about structural racism, implicit biases, market-based discrimination. We wouldn't be able to learn about housing segregation or wealth disparity or health disparities, algorithmic biases, and even predatory policing with these kinds of laws. Disparate impact doctrine. It's an actual legal rule that prohibits the use of policies and practices that disproportionately burden protected groups. That wouldn't be teachable under the ban against teaching anything that says racism is anything more than prejudice. Now, this is brought into sharp relief also this year because we're commemorating 70 years since the decision Brown versus Board of Education. Now, a key insight of that decision was that education was the very foundation of good citizenship. The court recognized that there couldn't be a functioning democracy where there existed a segregated and inequitable education system. Precisely the same inequities that now cannot be connected to the white supremacy that legitimized them. That's if these laws don't allow us to tell the history that needs to be told. Is this essential connection between education and democracy that our opponents on the right have imbibed and understood, often in much more tangible ways than some of the folks on our side, honestly? This is why the right-wing campaign can be described as an attempt to transform our schools, which should be laboratories of democracy, into what they call cradles of indoctrination. The threat has been made clear. Our opponents have shared their strategies for what might be a second Trump presidency. In their blueprint document, Project 2025, they lay out the plans to crush public education, civil rights infrastructure, and any controls on corporate power. In fact, their vision is particularly dystopian. Stephen Miller, one of the main backers of the Project 2025, has openly been discussing his plans to encourage law enforcement to arrest and round up teachers who violate anti-CRT bans. It shouldn't be a surprise to us that now our backs are really against the wall. We were always destined to be targeted in this way because education has been one of the most significant prophylactics against the anti-democratic authoritarianism and ultimately fascist elements in our society, something which Freedom Summer 1964 is a testament to. So given this history, they were bound to come for us, and we should have been ready. So now every Thursday throughout April, we want to get ready. We want to meet here to think through the ways that we can get organized and activated. And it's often that the struggles from our past serve as the critical lessons for our future. A crucial part of SNCC's success was gained by coming together to amplify, strategize, and inspire. And that's the spirit we hope to imbue you all with tonight and every Thursday leading into Freedom Summer. We're also thrilled to have our partner in this fight, the Zen Education Project, joining us today to speak more on how the fight for our schools is a fight for our democracy. But before we do all that stuff, this is the moment I know you've been waiting for. It's called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So let's get right into it. So first, for some good news. Remember Ryan Walters, the Oklahoma superintendent who said it was fine for us to talk about the Tulsa Race Massacre as long as we didn't talk about it as being a consequence of racism? I just talked about that tonight at the AERA. And the point was to make clear what these laws prevent us from talking about. Can you imagine not talking about the Oklahoma Tulsa race riot without talking about race? Well, Oklahoma voters were given the opportunity to offer their views about his destructive education policies, and their answer was a resounding rejection of his extremist views in 2 elections on the same day. One race ousted a neo-Nazi city councilman with ties to Walters, and another 3 Tulsa school board candidates who stood up to Walters' threats of a state takeover of their district won their races. This drives home the importance of local school board elections in the fight for our democracy. This serves as inspiration for how our communities can push back and not idly stand by. And now, unfortunately, we got to move to the bad. Although it's tempting to assume that all self-proclaimed Black political commentators are standing with us in the fight against all of the right's anti-woke efforts, we know that this just sadly isn't the case. As they say, not all skin folk are kinfolk. This was made evident by radio host Charlemagne the God's erroneous comments on DEI during his guest segment on The Daily Show. He claimed that, quote, the truth about DEI is that although it's well-intentioned, it's mostly garbage. Perhaps Charlemagne just doesn't know what garbage is, but let me provide some contemporary visualizations. Garbage is the right's attack on DEI, which is targeting Black women in particular who are striving to make workplaces and universities more inclusive for everyone. Garbage is Christopher Rufo, proudly referring to Claudine Gay's resignation as a scalping. Garbage is the right's coordinated backlash to the racial reckoning of 2020 to tear down the entire racial justice infrastructure in this country. If that's not complete trash, Charlemagne, I don't know what is. And yes, just when you think things can't get even uglier than this, they do. Since national protests for racial justice rocked this country back in 2020, there have been a myriad of efforts to enact reparations for Black American descendants of slaves. But Tennessee Republicans seem to have taken that as a threat. The Tennessee House plans to vote on a bill that would ban local municipalities from using funds to even study how reparations could be distributed to Black citizens. The war on free expression has extended even to ideas we haven't actualized yet. We can't fix a problem that we can't name, and we can't name it if we can't study it. But despite the challenges surrounding us, as we saw in the bad and ugly portions of our segment, we're excited and galvanized for Freedom Summer 2024. We've got a lot of things lined up for today's program. So to get us started, I would like to spotlight one of our panelists, Jessie Hagopian, to speak about the Zen Education Project, our partner organization for our program tonight. Jessie is a writer and educator based in Seattle. He's an organizer with the Black Lives Matters at School movement and a campaign organizer for the Zen Education Project. Either to amplify or strategize tonight, we are thrilled to come together and have this opportunity. So, Jessie, the Zen Education Project has been one of our partners in this campaign to defend truthful telling of history in public education from the first moments that we saw these attacks. Why was Zen Education Project so concerned about the effect of these laws on children and educators? And what impacts, Jessie, have you seen?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Kim. It's been an honor to partner with you and AAPF in this struggle from the very beginning. And, you know, that was even at a time when a lot of people thought that this would quietly go away when Trump left office. And linking arms with you all has been so important to helping to build this struggle. And I really think that we live in a time now that's defined by the assault on democracy in the form of laws that mandate that educators lie to students about race, about gender, about sexuality. They are attempting to impose a socialization process that will train people to accept the idea that historical truths should be banished from consciousness, right? This was described, I think, really well by Barbara Ransby, who called it proto-fascism, and compared what's happening now to the South African apartheid regime's book banning and curricular banning. And we're seeing this all across the country. The impacts are death threats against teachers. I have a friend here in Seattle, known as the liberal bastion. He taught the truth about genocide in Palestine and about the fluidity of gender. And they showed up to his school with a mobile billboard with his face on it and his name. They took out a website with his name on it to dox him, right? So This is what's causing a chilling effect where 2 out of 3 educators report that they are self-censoring so as not to be attacked around issues of race, or gender.
Yeah, and that effectively, is the point. No law can be effective unless people bow to it. And the point of these laws is to get people to bow to it without even having to apply it. So the chilling effect is doing all of the work that they want it to do. We know that Zen has been organizing against this and for a People's History Project. This is to activate students and educators and communities to defend the right to teach truth. So, how does your campaign promote the freedom to learn and defend truthful education?
Yeah, well, the Zen Education Project promotes and supports teaching of people's history in classrooms across the country. We take our name from the historian Howard Zinn, who wrote A People's History of the United States. And we create free downloadable people's history lessons for middle and high school educators. And our teaching materials really emphasize the role of Black folks, of working people, of women, people of color, LGBTQ folks, and the power of organized social movements like the Black freedom struggle in shaping history. And we have now over 160,000 people registered on our website, and we're growing by more than 10,000 new registrants every year. And I think this is important to say because this is happening despite the anti-history laws that they're imposing across the country. And so, there are a lot of teachers organizing and fighting back. Events like May 3rd are critical to this process. And the June 8th Teach Truth Day of Action is so important because we have to counter their master narrative that's rolled out in the media every day. We hear that there's a grassroots, quote, parents' rights movement that is pushing back against social justice education that wants to shame white kids. And we have to tell our counter narrative, which is actually the truth, that sequestered in their mansions and their private islands and their yachts, there are white plutocrats who are issuing edicts to politicians and media conglomerates that they own about eliminating curriculum that implicates their own accumulation of power and wealth. Right? That's really what's causing this attack on honest education. And when we show up and fight back, we create that other narrative.
Yes. And one of the narratives that we're hoping to create together this May 3rd is to connect the folks who are concerned about what's happening in our schools with the folks who are concerned about the perilous state of our democracy. So from your vantage point, from the work that you've been doing, what kinds of directions or strategies do you think would bear fruit in this endeavor?
Yeah, definitely getting involved in the National Teach Truth Day of Action on June 8th and Freedom to Learn on May 3rd. And that's about taking the time to pick a historic site in your community that you would like to highlight how it connects to the Black freedom struggle or examples of systemic racism and do a teach in there. Or even more simple, you can go to a bookstore or a library or a museum and have a table out front with flyers and information about how these laws are banning books and curriculum. These are easy ways to get involved, but as you said at the top, getting involved in your local school board is crucial. Showing up to the school board meetings and testifying to demand ethnic studies programs, not just to repeal the laws banning the truth, but to implement ethnic studies and Black studies and gender studies and queer studies programs so that kids can learn about their own identities.
Right.
And maybe even run for school board yourself.
So we don't want to go back to the status quo, right? We want a far more robust, affirmative embrace of our histories and more participation, more of a role in determining what our children we'll be learning. So thank you, Jesse. We are always excited to hear about the work that the Zen Education Project is doing, and always an honor to partner with you. We'll be talking again later.
That means a lot to me. Thank you, Kim.
Before I welcome Judy Richardson from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, I'd like to play a short clip that will serve as an introduction to Freedom Schools in 1964. It's from the PBS documentary Freedom Summer. So sit back and relax. Enjoy this clip.
One of the most wonderful things about 1964 Mississippi summer were the Freedom Schools.
The state of Mississippi deliberately and systematically kept Black people uneducated and ignorant, and then turned around and made education a requirement in order to participate in the political process. We were able to do the Freedom Schools in the summer of 1964 because we had almost 1,000 students coming to the state of Mississippi, thus the human resources to actually, conduct classes.
We hope to find and develop and mold local leadership among the young people. We also hope to promote a better self-image among the local Negroes.
We would send out mass flyers and everything to the churches, telling people about the Freedom School, what the Freedom School was going to entail, the courses, the activities. We got the preachers involved, we got the kids involved.
Black people couldn't go to the library. It was for whites only. And so here they are, got their own library now. They would come excited to be exposed to the teaching and to browse the books.
In the public schools where I was in school, I had never heard of Dr. Seuss. It was at Freedom School where we actually not only read the story of the Cat in the Hat, but we acted it out. Having our lives enriched by these activities really made a huge difference in my life.
We taught African American history, civics, African culture, African dance. They were learning Black history, that they were reading books that had been written by Blacks that they'd never heard of.
How were slaves first introduced in America?
As we saw back on this world map over here, America started picking up slaves along here and then bringing them back.
What we were trying to do that summer is get people to talk about their own lives, talk about good and bad, and talk about ways in which you could bring about change. I think that was very much the drive of the program.
They had a sense of being needed by something much bigger than themselves and a sense of being able to handle the problems that they were needed for. They did it by asking questions and by being encouraged to feel free to ask questions.
They were raring to go. We were just kind of like the catalyst. We were agents of information and agents of a different world. So, I mean, just the very fact that we were talking about a world that they didn't know or didn't have much experience with was exciting to them and also to us.
We set them up for the little children to come, and every day we'd have classrooms of adults, people 50, 60, and 70 years of age. The adults came to the Freedom School to learn, just like the little children.
Beautiful. What an insightful clip with so many reverberations of the past that amplify what we're facing in this present moment. I would love to introduce you all to Miss Judy Richardson, veteran member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Ms. Richardson is a documentary filmmaker and a producer. She's currently directing the Visitor Center film on Frederick Douglass for the National Park Service in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us. I cannot, my mama raised me right. You are an elder of mine. You lit the path for us. So I'm going to have to call you Miss Richardson.
Okay.
One of the things the video describes as a motivation for Freedom Summer was the intentional miseducation of Black children in Mississippi. So as someone who was on the ground during Freedom Summer 64, and I could just talk to you for hours, could you share more, paint us a picture about why there was such a need to start freedom schools as part of the demand for democratic inclusion?
Oh, absolutely. And can I just say, I'm just so happy to be here. I love your sessions. It's wonderful to have been here with Jesse, because I go on all of the Teaching for Change, Zen-Ed, monthly sessions, and I just follow you guys, and I'm just so honored to be here. So I have to say that first. Okay.
It's our honor to have you.
Thank you. But what's amazing, I mean, one of the things to just always keep in mind is that Black folks have always been about education. This is from Jump, right?
Mhm.
So, and that was a great clip, by the way, that you showed. But in Mississippi, and at that point, basically throughout the United States, I mean, I was coming out of Tarrytown, New York, 45 minutes north of New York City. And I was taught a version of the same stuff that they're getting in Mississippi, which was the lost cause view of history, right? Subordination.
In New York, they were teaching lost cause stuff in New York.
I was the only Black person in my AP 10th grade history class. And the only, we had one small chapter on Reconstruction, and the only illustration in that little small section was directly from the Klansman, on which Birth of a Nation was based.
Oh my
gosh. It was a little line drawing. It had what was supposed to be a Black state legislator with his feet up on his bare feet up on the desk of the state legislature. So I didn't get anything, nor did my white classmates. And that's very important. It's not just I who am being targeted. It's the white kids. And so none of us are getting any sense of Reconstruction. We don't get that, they're mandating free public education, not just for the formerly enslaved, but for the poor whites who had been denied it. I'm not getting anything about the all Black communities of the formerly enslaved that are doing banks and schools and businesses, that they are self-sufficient. So in freedom schools, we always taught about Black organizing and resistance and Black resilience as well. And that's why you see this wonderful freedom primer. And that's what we produced in SNCC. And as a matter of fact, I helped distribute it. SCLC, Dr. King's organization, had begun to use it in their citizenship schools. But we did it because what we were showing was that we were providing both truthful and empowering education that would allow young Black Mississippians to know that they could change the oppression that they were living under. And of course, there were already Black leaders who had been talking long time about this, like Medgar Evers and Amzie Moore, and of course, my one, Ella Baker, who is behind me. And they had long been preaching that kind of gospel at the grassroots. But we're always focusing on what is, not on what is, but always on what should and can be. So for example, in the freedom schools, they're looking at the Mississippi state constitution even. Now, these are young people, young Black folks, and they're talking about, well, what's in this constitution? And does it help you? Does it help your community? Does it help poor white people who may be your neighbors? Does it
Mhm.
help the Latinos who may be picking the crops? Does this Constitution help anybody but rich white people, right?
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
are investigating even the state constitution in Mississippi. So what we're doing always is talking about education for liberation. Yeah.
Right, right, right.
And by the way, can I just mention one quick thing?
Mhm.
Charlie Cobb, whom you had in there. Now, Charlie, of
Yeah.
course, is the one who initiates, conceptualizes the idea of freedom schools, right? But in this wonderful thing that you can find on CRM Vet, Crim Vets, Civil Rights Movement Vet, crmvet.org,
Mhm.
free documentary you can download. But what he says in this, and you get, Toussaint Louverture, slave revolts, Negroes and
Mhm.
Indians, women in the movement, Negro cowboys, Reconstruction. But Charlie's intro says this is a history about us. It is
Right.
about a history that has been denied us by lies about what we are and what we have been. And what all this means is that this is really a history book about us today, as well as about us yesterday. We
Yeah.
wrote this, we SNCC people wrote this in 1965 because we were trying to allow folks to understand the real history, the true history.
Right, right. And there's nothing new under the sun in the effort to suppress that history and to, erase our literacy about ourselves. I'm particularly struck not just by the fact that the lost cause was, thrown at students in Mississippi, but it was a national, story as well, showing the power, of the Daughters of the Confederacy, their ability to expand their version, of Reconstruction to the entire country. We're seeing this happening right now with the repression, suppression of Black history. It's not just a red state problem; it's a blue state, problem as well. We went on a tour 2022 around the midterm elections, and part of what we were trying to do on the tour was give out the banned books for free, but also in conjunction with the Transformative Justice Coalition, we were trying to raise awareness about the historic link between the suppression of Black history and Black literacy about our condition and the suppression of our voting power. So can you speak a little bit about how those two things came together in Freedom Summer 1964? Because obviously they're still coming together in 2024.
Absolutely. And in fact, Black folks, what we're always talking about is that long history of organizing for the vote, and also organizing for resistance, from the colored conventions, during enslavement, to the Regional Council of Negro Leadership, which is these World War II vets organizing in Mississippi, like Medgar Evers and Amzie Moore, around economic equity, because it's always about economic equity, and the vote, and understanding how those two are intertwined. But to know that we have always fought and organized for freedom, and talking about in 64 what is doable and what is possible, but always joining the education to the idea of the vote. And I would just mention, we're doing an NEH project, we at SNCC Legacy Project. But one of the things that we have done is it's called Toolkits, but there I am, I'm in the middle. And what you see in there, by the way, is Marion Barry, who was our first chairman. You see Julie Bond way off. I'm the one sitting with the mouth open singing. John Lewis is kind of between me and Gene Smith.
Wow.
You've seen Jim Foreman off to the left, his head is down. Julian Bond always had the cigarette until he stopped smoking, off to the far right. So we're singing because singing, of course, was one of the ways that, as we say, we got over, But what I was going to mention is, in terms of that connection between voting and education, one of the things that we do in this toolkit that we're working with now on arts and culture is we're talking about poetry that we did use during the Freedom Schools. And there was this wonderful poem done by a 16-year-old in Macomb, Mississippi, and her name was Joyce Brown. And in Macomb, there was so much fear that about the vote, about anything that seemed like movement, that the Black folks in Macomb were afraid of even giving us a place to hold the Freedom School in.
Yeah.
So we were
Yeah.
meeting for a while in a yard behind a burned out Freedom House. But then this wonderful child, Joyce Brown, writes this poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but her last paragraph is, in a bombed church house, I have to teach my school, because she says, I believe all men should live by the golden rule. To a bombed house, your children must come because of your fear of a bomb, and because you let your fear conquer your soul. In this bombed house, these minds I must try to mold. I must try to teach them to stand tall and be a man. When you, their parents, have cowered down and refused to take a stand. Now, after the community read this poem, they then opened up the church and began to be much more actively involved in the voter registration campaign. And it was that connection between the poetry, the young people, and young people bringing their parents in. And, you know, also studying what they had learned in the freedom schools. And the parents would be looking over, sometimes by a candle, because, you know, we're in the rural Mississippi. Some folks, we certainly didn't have indoor plumbing, but we also sometimes did not have electricity. And so they're looking at this on little, you know, little tables, and the parents or caretakers are looking over and saying, what are you studying here? And the kids are teaching the parents what they have been taught in the freedom schools.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the organic dimension, you know, of the Freedom School, of this model of community-driven education. You know, part of the way that the education censorship laws are functioning today is not to say, you know, you can't teach, you know, different periods of history, but actually it's a little worse. It's dictating how they're to be taught, you know? So I would imagine, oh, you can teach the freedom schools, but you can't teach it from a perspective that elevates the miseducation of the students. You can't teach it in a way that suggests that these inequalities were intentional and designed to, you know, exclude communities. And I shared at the top how North Dakota has this law that mandates that, you know, racism can't be taught as anything other than, you know, an aberration, a bias on the individual level. So as you think about the Freedom Summer and like what version of history is being told and taught, how do you think about its message for us in terms of understanding racism, not solely about individuals and bias, but about systems and laws that keep students from learning about who they are?
No, absolutely. And I will say that one of the amazing things that I learned in SNCC was to think about racism as systemic white supremacy. I had never heard about that in Tarrytown, right? I'm learning about that in SNCC, and that's what we're talking about in these freedom schools. So we always understood it's not about a particular racist sheriff, right? That sheriff is connected to and protected by a system of white supremacy.
That's
So
right.
that means that you're not just targeting ex-sheriff, right? Sheriff Clark, for example, in Selma, because to get rid of him, if you got rid of him, you would think, oh, well, I've solved the problem. Well, no, he is connected in the same way that in Mississippi, they're connected to the folks in the State House, which was all white. They are connected to the powerful Mississippi Senator Stennis and Senator Eastland, who wielded humongous power because they ran they were the chairs of the House, the Senate Appropriations Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee, people with amazing amounts of money and power that were connected to what we were doing because they kept getting in and getting seniority because Black people were being denied the right to vote.
That's right.
So you always had to understand that it wasn't this particular errant, you know, police officer who just hadn't had enough sensitivities training, right? That he was part of the system. And that's one of the things that we understood even in 1964. We do a thing called, it was called the a chronology of violence and intimidation in Mississippi. And we gave that out in all the press packets to all of the national media that is coming down to show all of the incidents of racist violence against people who are trying to register to vote from 1961 to 1963. and the violence and the murders and the Herbert Lees who were killed for trying to organize, because then you see, oh, it's not just happening in Macomb and it's not just happening in Jackson. It's not just this individual crazy cop. It is because they are buttressed and supported by a system of racist intimidation and violence that is designed to keep any marginalized community from gaining power. It's not just us. We did understand that too. It wasn't
Yeah.
just Black people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we are also celebrating, commemorating this year is the 70th anniversary of Brown. So we have the 60th of 1964 Freedom Summer and the 70th of Brown. And one of the things that often gets, sort of attached to the Brown sensibility is that they are nurseries of democracy, that you have to be able to have access to quality education, and education that's 360, that's about your life as well as the life of those around you. As you think about our fight now to correct the deliberate distortions in our public school curriculum, what do we need to keep forefront and foremost in our thinking about what the role of public education is in our democracy?
Well, if you don't know, it's that old thing. If you don't know what went wrong in the past, then you'll keep doing it in the future, right?
Yeah.
But the other part is you need to see, particularly for young people. I mean, it's not just that they teach this, they misteach, they badly teach the civil rights movement, right? So that people think it was only Dr. King. Still, K-12, still, it's mainly Dr. King. And he was brilliant. There is no question, right? But if you don't know about Amzie Moore in Cleveland, or Medgar Evers in Jackson, or Amelia Boynton in Selma, or Ann Braden, amazing white activist who was like this with Miss Baker in Kentucky, or of course, Miss Baker, who was, legendary strategist for us. If you don't know about these people, or you don't know the young people who were absolutely amazing organizers. I was 19, right, when I come into SNCC. Marion Barry was maybe 20, 21 years old. Julian Bond was considered old because he was like 21, Diane Nash, they're all 19, 20 years old when they are doing what they're doing.
Yes.
But what they're doing is also organizing with other people of like mind.
Yes.
Because it's hard. You cannot do this by yourself, but you need to know and put yourself in this history. You need to see yourself in this history. Because if folks don't know that it was their mothers and their teachers and their clergy and their fellow students who made and sustained the movement,
that's right.
And they won't know that they can do it again, right?
Oh,
and that's the whole point of the other folks who want to make sure we don't teach this real history. They do not want us to see ourselves as the ones who made it and changed the country and made it more democratic for everybody.
It's almost as though they value the history perhaps more than we do. They know it's dangerous history for their ends. And we need to, if they're trying to take it away from us, at minimum, we need to say, no, you don't get to take this, right? Even if you don't yet know how important it is. Well, thank you so much for your work and your vision and for demonstrating what making good trouble actually looks like, right? To be in the flesh as a good troublemaker. And I also want to say to you, in your role as a filmmaker, Eyes on the Prize is something I come back to every year in my teaching. And it is such a powerful testament to the role of young people. I always end up, asking my students, what would you put your life on the line for? What are you willing to put it all out to secure? And for the most part, you all were younger than my law students, and that's always shocking to them, right? And it's always an inspiration to me. So it's been an honor to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
So we're now going to turn to our Artivism segment for tonight's program. I'm going to welcome actor Rosalind Coleman to provide us with a reading of an excerpt from, you just heard about her, Ella Baker's speech from 1964 in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Following the assassination of Medgar Evers a year prior, renowned civil rights activist Baker reflects on what that pivotal moment meant for the Black freedom struggle at large. Take it away, Rosalind.
I always like to think that the very God who gave us life gave us liberty. And if we don't have liberty, it's because somebody else has stood between us and that which God has granted us. And so we have come here tonight to renew our struggle for that which we are entitled by virtue of being children of the Almighty. The right to be men and women to grow and to develop to the fullest capacity which He has endowed us. And as I have listened here tonight, my spirit has roved over a long period of years. And I can think of a number of things I would like to say. But if I had anything at all to say tonight, is to remind us of something that occurred to me, something that came into focus in a conversation on the night that Medgar Evers' body came through Atlanta. A group of people were down at the station among us. We were there for the purpose of identifying with the great tragedy that had occurred in being shot to death. And after the ceremony, the little ceremony in the station, one of the civil rights leaders, I won't name any because leadership is one of those things, you know. I won't talk about them too much. But this person said, we are in the final stages of the freedom struggle. And I challenge that. We are not in the final stages of the freedom struggle. We are really just beginning. We are just beginning the freedom struggle. Let me tell you why. Because even tomorrow, if every vestige of racial discrimination were wiped out, if all of us became free enough to go down and to associate with all the people we wanted to associate with, we still are not free. We aren't free until within us we have that deep sense of freedom. A lot of things that we don't even mention in these meetings. And I'm not talking about Negroes, I'm talking about people. People cannot be free until they realize that peace. You see, we can't talk about peace. Peace is not the absence of war or struggle. It is the presence of justice. People cannot, pardon me, people cannot be free until there is enough work in this land to give everybody a job. Tomorrow, if we were able to vote our full strength, and we still voted our full strength until we recognize that in this country, in a land of great plenty and great wealth, there are millions of people who go to bed hungry every night. So we're going to have these freedom schools, and we're going to have to learn a lot of things in them. We're going to have to learn to be concerned about the kind of education our children are getting in school. And all of this has to be done along at the same time that we also recognize that our white brothers, the very white brothers in Hattiesburg and in other parts of Mississippi who have kept us in bondage, that they did it because they didn't know any better. They have been fooled. And they have been fooled by those who told them the big lie. The big lie was to the effect that they could do what they wanted in Mississippi with the Negro question. And you know what? The rest of the country for a long time tacitly agreed. That is, they didn't do anything about it. And so all of us stand guilty at this moment for having waited so long to lend ourselves to a fight for the freedom, not of Negroes, not of the Negroes of Mississippi, but for the freedom of the American spirit, for the freedom of the human spirit for freedom. And this is the reason I am here tonight.
Well, Rosalind, that was powerful. I think it burnt up the internet. We lost you, but we were with you. That was
Oh, I'm sorry, you lost me.
I think maybe we lost Professor Crenshaw.
Oh, okay. Not sure what happened.
Rosalind, you can continue and we'll get Professor Crenshaw back on. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I'm almost done. All right, I'll just go back to the last paragraph. Okay, and so we all stand guilty at this moment for having waited so long to lend ourselves to a fight for the freedom, not of Negroes, not of the Negroes of Mississippi, but for the freedom of the American spirit, for the freedom of the human spirit, for the freedom, and for this reason I am here tonight. And this is the reason I think that these young men who have worked and given their bodies in the movement for freedom, they are here not because they want to see something take place just for the fun of it. They are here because they should know, and I think they do know, that the freedom which they seek is a larger freedom that encompasses all mankind. And until that day, we will never turn back.
Thank you so much, Rosalind, for sharing those beautiful words from Ella Baker. I am forever moved, by her leadership. And so thank you for bringing them into this space. I now want to welcome back to our conversation, Jessie Hagopian, to take up part of our conversation and our insight about schools being laboratories of democracy. So, Jessie, nowadays, we often hear the refrain from both the right and sometimes liberals that children are just too young to learn about this history that we've been sitting in for the last hour. And this seems, of course, odd because, none of the children in Mississippi were deemed to be too young to experience the effects of structural racism. but now we're told children are too young to learn about it. What is your sense about who is being protected by these so-called discomfort bills, and also what's missing in terms of the well-being of our students?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say that my heart feels full having heard those wonderful words from Ella Baker and your conversation with Judy Richardson. It just is lighting my imagination up because, you know, I use, Kimberly, one of your talks every year in my classroom with my students to help them understand intersectionality. And I use Eyes on the Prize every year in my classroom that Judy helped produce. And so to be with you all that have made my teaching so much more rich and full is really incredible. And that's exactly the kind of lessons that they don't want our students to be taught, right? And it's that kind of analysis that you heard Judy break down that they are trying to ban from the classroom, saying that it will cause white students discomfort. And of course, the irony of these discomfort laws is that they prove the core principles of CRT correct, right? That racism can be embedded in the law even when it appears race neutral, right? So here we have laws that don't explicitly ban teaching Black history, but they do ban things that make you uncomfortable. And that then, you know, obviously a lot of the history that we discussed makes white people uncomfortable. And so they've effectively banned it. And I think that, you know, when they say that white kids, that all children are too young to have these kind of conversations, as you said, if Black kids are old enough to experience racism, then white kids are certainly old enough to learn about it. And I think there's a recent study that came out that showed that actually Black teens are nearly twice as likely as white teens to be made uncomfortable in classrooms when discussions about racial inequality come up, right? So it's just a pure myth about the white discomfort that's happening.
Yeah. And, you know, along with, you know, the myth of white discomfort is just normalizing the fact that our own children, you know, are expected to go to school and not have any meaningful engagement with their history. And that discomfort that you mentioned is just, you know, part of life, right? So when you mentioned earlier that we don't want to just go back to the status quo, we want to go beyond it. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about, you know, creating a classroom that serves all our children, which means that we're not skipping over things, but we're teaching them effectively in an age-appropriate way. Right. So thank you so much, Jesse. We're going to circle back to you. But now we are going to go to our next segment, White Lies Matter. I'm going to turn it over to our favorite anti-racist educator, Tim Wise. As you are aware, Tim was anointed by the root, the 8 wokest white people I know. We're also thrilled to have Tim guide us through another moment of White Lies Matter. Tim?
Well, thank you so much. First off, it is worth noting that when someone says you're one of the 8 wokest white people, it's like, you know, they couldn't even come up with 10 names. So it's not necessarily all that impressive. It's 8. And I was literally 8th, which I would like to think was because it was alphabetical, but what the hell do I know? I'll take it. But I mean,
we're gonna go with that. This
is not a job for which millions of white people are applying, unfortunately. So
the line is pretty short.
Right. In any event, I wanted to sort of build off what you and Jesse were talking about a second ago, this idea that right-wing folks are somehow concerned about the feelings of white children. I mean, first of all, a lot of these people are the same people that drag their white children to church every Sunday to hear a lesson that tells them if they don't believe a certain set of things, that Satan is going to jab them in the eyeball with a pitchfork for all eternity in a lake of fire. So are we supposed to believe that they can handle that but they can't handle a story about Ruby Bridges integrating New Orleans schools. I mean, it's sort of ridiculous, right? They don't care about white kids' feelings. What they care about is making sure that white kids don't learn about injustice, because if they learn about it, they might want to do something about it, right? These are folks, these white folks who are pushing these laws, and some of their allies of color, sadly. They saw millions of young white people in the streets after George Floyd, and they know that young people typically have an innate sense of justice, right? So if white kids learn the history of racism and its current impact, they might want to do something about it and act just like they have with gun violence and climate change, et cetera. So that's the first point. But even if the concern about white guilt and shame were legitimate, like that was actually what they cared about, there is an easy answer to that problem, and they never propose it. Listen, if you have a problem when you learn history, it makes you feel bad about being white, it's because you're learning about the wrong white people, right? If the only white people that you learn about are the ones who enslaved others or who went along with that system or stood silent during Jim Crow, then yeah, you're going to feel some kind of way about the legacy of whiteness and white people. But the answer to that is to contrast those folks with the other white folks who oppose those things, because there were always whites going back to the colonial period who opposed enslavement, who opposed segregation, who opposed lynching, who opposed conquest, who opposed genocide, discrimination, et cetera. And surely if we're going to remember Freedom Summer, we have to remember there were whites who fought and occasionally died for the cause of justice, and others who fought and didn't die and continue to fight today. So we have a choice about how to live in this skin. You don't have to be like Andrew Jackson or Woodrow Wilson or Bull Connor. You can be like Bob and Dottie Zellner, Joan Trumpauer Mulholland, John Fee, Connie Curry, Ann and Carl Braden, on down the line. But the right doesn't want us to learn those folks and their history, because if white people see there's a choice to make, they might make better ones, right? So that's what this is really.
As so many people did during the 2020 mass mobilization against the murder of George Floyd. I want to talk a minute about this notion of victim mentality, because that's one of the things that the right sort of slips into the conversation against this kind of teaching, that it will cause Black and brown kids to feel like they're victimized, or that they're going to develop resentment against white people, and they want instead Black kids to buckle up, brown kids to be resilient, to feel empowered, and stressing injustice makes them feel hopeless. Yet at the same time, they're framing white kids as basically helpless and in need of protection. So I mean, how do we respond to this kind of argument, its asymmetries and the way that it is justifying shutting down what we ought to be able to teach our kids?
Well, I mean, that's their pivot, right? They start by saying, white kids are going to be made to feel bad, but then they sort of realize that sounds a little ridiculous. And then they go, oh, but our actual concern is Black children. We don't want Black children to learn about this horrible history, because then they'll feel like they're permanent victims and they have no chance in life. This is ridiculous. The idea that the right wing's big concern is the self-esteem and self-image of Black and brown children is so laughable that we ought not even have to address it. But unfortunately we do. These are people who are basically saying racism isn't a real thing. So whatever disparities exist between white and Black folks, for instance, that's just the fault of Black people not working as hard or not being as smart or making bad choices. How in the world is that argument better for Black self-image? I mean, that's just absurd, because that's what you're left with, right? If you take away the history and the contemporary reality of racism, what you're left with is Black people are broken. That's supposed to be a more affirming message. That's supposed to be a more empowering message. It's also disrespectful to Black and brown intellect. I mean, do people actually believe that Black children wouldn't know anything about racism until the big bad CRT workshop that took place after recess in 3rd grade told them about it? Is it like, do we think that that's what's going on? Research shows that Black kids, for instance, know about the racial stereotypes held about their group no later than the age of 8, which is what, like 2nd or 3rd grade, right? And it's not because they read bell hooks. It's not because they read Derek Bell. It's not because they read you. It's not because they read Patricia Williams. It's because they have been treated badly on the basis of those stereotypes. What teaching this stuff allows us to do is to validate the lived experiences of Black and brown people and to give some context for what it is they're experiencing. That's empowering, not disempowering. And that is why they don't want the material taught, because they know that if Black kids were to get clarity around the way that systemic racism has misshaped this society, they aren't going to buy into those right-wing arguments that say Black people are to blame for their own status in America. It's the right that wants Black folks to blame themselves. It's anti-racist education, which pushes back against that. Their approach is the approach that assaults Black and brown self-image and dignity, not ours.
Thank you, Tim, as always, for these incredible mic drop moments. So I'm now going to pass the mic to Kay to lead us through this week's Activation Spotlight. Kay?
Thank you so much, Kim. Excited about being back on the stage because this is the moment where we help you plan your activation for the May 3rd National Day of Action. This week, we want to review briefly what we've achieved last year. We had over 120 local activations, over half of which were in person. We had 4.4 million social media impressions that we tracked on May 3rd, 2023. We saw Freedom Circle book clubs, Freedom School teach-ins, banned book readathons on college campuses and local communities, including libraries and independent bookstores. We also had major protests in state capitals in Florida and Texas. That was last year. Now it's time to start planning what you're going to do for 2024. Gather your folks together and reach out to other organizations in your area. Get creative. Put banned books in unexpected places. Put them in a barbershop, put them in a beauty parlor, or even paint a mural. Let's try to have even more in-person activations this year. Finally, it's just as important to think at the outset about how you will document your activation to provide the powerful counter images of educational censorship, because we need the world to know that we are the majority. That is the message. Now, with that brief review of what we've done last year, I'm really delighted to bring on two guests to provide quick hits on how they'll be working their networks and people for this year. First up, we have Sylvia Cyrus, who is the second longest serving executive director of ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Hello, Sylvia. Thank you for joining me on the stage. I think you're on mute. If you could unmute yourself, Sylvia, thank you.
Sorry about that. Yes, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks, Dr. K and our team for having me and ASALH here tonight. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much. Last year, ASALH partnered with us, and you shared all of our information about the National Day of Action, motivating your membership base to get involved and get activated. At your conference last year, you organized a banned book reading in Florida, of all places. Can you talk very quickly about how an organization can mobilize its members to come together, pool their resources, and do something like a banned book reading, no matter where they are?
I think it's just important for everyone to reach out to whatever network you're in. ASALH was really on fire. We said we ran to the fight in Florida because of what was happening relative to banned books, what was happening to the destruction of teaching of Black history in Florida. And Florida happens to be the state with the largest number of ASALH members, and they helped us mobilize thousands of people across the state. And we had a wonderful conference culminating with a banned book event that had the likes of Angela Davis and Rodney Hurst and Representative Angie Nixon and Charlie Cobb and Jocelyn Amani. So it was cross-generational, it was cross-community, and the community was on fire about this topic because when they heard that teachers were being intimidated, that children were actually crying in class because they didn't understand what was happening, we were able to pull our members and the community together, and everyone can do this in their own community because unfortunately, this is not just happening in Florida, but it is happening across the nation. So I'm calling on all members of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, all organizations that have anything to do with education and social justice. We have a wonderful social justice program where we trained individuals on what social justice was about. It's still available on our website at asalh.org. You can get there. There are tools out here as well as with other partners here, but we have to take a stand. We have to make it happen now. If it's not us, who? If it's not now, when? Because what we stand to lose at this point is just unfathomable. You cannot sit in your seat and not say to your faith-based organization, to your sorority, your fraternity, your historical society, that they need to take a stand now. We gave out 2,500 banned books. So just like you indicated, take them, leave them at the beauty shop, leave them at the barber shop. We even have individuals who got those little book huts in their front yard. Leave them there. But we have to bring to the attention of this world, especially in this country that we're in right now, that the nature of the books that were banned were not all scary. Amanda Gorman's book was not scary, but yet it was banned. So we're asking everyone to come together, join ASALH and other organizations on this day. We can and will make a difference if we want to. And with the help of your organization and all of the partners, we can make a difference.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. The second longest serving executive director of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, is joining us on our National Day of Action, May 3rd. They're taking the fight where it belongs. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you.
Guest is Nadira Young Bedford, a middle school teacher from Baltimore City. Nadira, thank you so much for joining me up here on the stage. I appreciate you because last year you organized an incredible activity at your school. Now, I called it Drop Everything and Read a Banned Book. You call it a book flood. Can you very quickly tell us a bit about this incredible way that as a teacher, even in a state where books are banned, they can turn their classroom into a space of liberation for May 3rd?
Yes, so the book flood, AKA Drop Everything and Read a Banned Book, is where we create a list as teachers. And so I create a list of books. We focus on a lot of banned books, so books by authors of color, books by women, books that our students may not see in the curriculum, but books that are a reflection of them. We create a list of it, we send it out to friends, families, organizations, and we ask them to sponsor a book. So they buy one or more books. And then we have one day at our school where the kids get to wear their pajamas, they have hot chocolate, and then they spend that day, whether it's just the ELA class or a portion of the day, reading their book. And then it also is a book that they get to take home with them. It's free to them, there are no strings attached, but they choose their book. That's the other thing. So they get to almost feel like they're in a bookstore, but the bookstore is only of books by authors of color and things like that, so that they are exposed to different cultures, but it does center Black history, just because that is also a reflection of our schools and what's needed.
Thank you so much. What I like about that, Nadira, is the fact that in so many states, these books have been pulled from the curriculum. By setting up your classroom as a place of liberation, drop everything or read a banned book, you're bringing them into the school and the students can then take it home. This is middle school, folks. That's why they have pajamas on. And in high school, just have they can be comfortable. Thank you so much, Nadira Young Bedford, a middle school teacher, for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Folks, these are different ways you can activate either through an organization or as an individual. Turn your space into a space of liberation, no matter where you are, for May 3rd, our National Day of Action. I'm now going to turn it over to Jocelyn Walker, our VP of Communications at AAPF, for our weekly comms tip. Take it away, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much, Dr. K. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here with you again tonight. In case you missed it last week, I spoke about the who and the what of a communication strategy, who is driving the opposition narrative, and what are the steps to begin building a proactive narrative. Tonight's second communication tip will focus on the where of a communication strategy. So where can you tell your story and continue building this proactive counter narrative? And we're going to start with a little storytelling about Freedom Summer 1964. A lot of this is, I'm so great that we had Miss Judy Richardson on here to really talk about, what it was like on the ground. And so what you see here, the Student Voice is the newspaper of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They began publishing in June 1960 to provide student movement news, including news about Freedom Summer of 1964. For 5 years, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee led a communication strategy for civil rights that included coverage in the Student Voice newspaper, instructions for press coverage, press releases, reporter lists, internal newsletters, and more. The images you see here are materials collected from Freedom Summer volunteer Pamela Parker Allen, who worked in a Freedom School in Holly Springs, Mississippi. This newspaper clip begins with the poem, who was mentioned earlier by Mrs. Richardson, who said by a young Black girl named Joyce Brown. The newspaper clip also includes stories from teachers and provides facts on the educational system in Mississippi to really tell a full story about the freedom schools in Mississippi and why they're important. And so the Student Voice is a great example of a successful communication strategy that combines facts, storytelling, imagery, and organizational tactics to bring important issues to national attention. And I want to note that this was all before social media, no digital organizing, but they got it done. Freedom Summer 1964 is historic, and 60 years later, we have the opportunity to educate audiences and share why Freedom Summer 2024 is an urgent moment to advocate for the freedom to learn. So how can you get involved? You can, one, submit an op-ed, an opinion piece to an online publication that is read by general audiences. I'm not talking about the New York Times. It could be a publication, a national outlet like The Guardian, or even your local news outlet like the Detroit Free Press. Second, you can submit a letter to the editor of your local newspaper to really counter pieces that you see on the right side that discourage inclusive and equitable education. Third, if you work at an organization, write a blog post on the importance of freedom to learn amidst attacks on DEI and CRT. And then last, if you're a student, get involved with your student newspaper and submit a story about the importance of freedom to learn that could also highlight how students are mobilizing on campus. I want to end by saying some of you may be thinking, maybe I don't have a specific story to share, or maybe my opinion on this issue doesn't matter. I'm not, this large spokesperson, but that is absolutely not true. Your voice does matter. It's important for all of our voices to be heard in order to sound the alarm about the larger goals behind these anti-democratic efforts and highlight how we're collectively gearing up for Freedom Summer 2024. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jocelyn. And thanks to everyone for joining us for our second homeroom in the run-up to our second annual National Day of Action on May 3rd. Given the hour, we won't be going into breakouts this week, but we do look forward to hearing more from all of you next week. Now, please show your love and appreciation in the chat for our co-sponsors this week from the SNCC Legacy Project and Zen Education Project. With those very special thanks to Judy Richardson and Jesse Hagopian. We hope that you leave inspired and connected to others working together to build our collective counterpower. Now, be sure to register for next week's homeroom if you haven't done so already. And please, please, please share out the link with your social media networks and listservs. Now, our goal is to double attendance at least every week. So for you to help us with that, please come with 5 friends. We want to gather up our people to activate together. That is the radical act that we are doing collectively. Now, to get ready for next week, we have to realize that the other faction behind this backlash is merely the vocal but very organized minority. As the title of next week's homeroom attests, we are the majority, how parents can protect education and multiracial democracy is the theme of the hour. If you are a parent, if you have a parent or know a parent, which is pretty much everyone, you can't miss next week when we'll be hearing how you can refuse to be part of that majority. Actually, the minority. So thanks always to my small but mighty AAPF team, to our partners at Zen Education Project who helped us convene this event, to all of our speakers tonight. And lastly, a big thanks to all of you for attending and participating. Good night, and hope to see you all and more next week.